Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being with us today again. My name is Giacomo Beccari. And on behalf of the EASE Office for Science, I would like to welcome you all to the fourth day of our the Present and Future of Astronomy conference, ASTRO2022. This is the program of today. The topic of today is something that is of great relevance, and we are very proud, very happy, and very anxious to hear the talks of all our speakers. So I don't want to take you to take much of the time from the speakers. I just wanted to thank them all, of course, since now immediately, because of their availability and the help in making this event possible. Just to very quickly, you see there is a part 1 and part 2. The part 1 will end around 3:20, 3:30 probably, or it's a bit more 3:45 or something like that. So then there will be a coffee break, and then there will be a part 2. On people on YouTube, please stay with us. We will basically close the first streaming, and then we start the second streaming, still in the Cosmic Duo channels. So if you go back to the main page, you will see the new streaming happening again at 4 when we start with the last part, with the second part of the entire event. Just general points that I would like to make. As you know, you can participate either via as a registered participant, so it means that you join us in the Zoom meeting. In that case, you can make your question during the discussion by raising your hand or writing your comment on the chat. Of course, this is something that I would like to stress, especially today, but every day. So everyone, any career stage, is welcome to make questions and to participate into the discussion. But today, I think I would like to give a big encouragement to early career scientists and young astronomers, young researchers. This is the topic of today is relevant for everyone, but we acknowledge the fact that the pandemic had consequences, and these consequences are particularly important for early career scientists. So we would like to hear from you. We would like to listen to you, and so please feel encouraged. Of course, we acknowledge that being online and having a discussion online is not easy. But we will do our best, and the chair of today, the chairperson, which is who is Anna Miotello. She's a great person. And all our speakers are fantastic persons. So I'm 100% sure you're gonna feel very comfortable. That's what I want to say. The other possibility is to watch the live streaming on YouTube. In that case, you can make your question or comment using the live chat, and we will pass the comment to the chair, to Anna, for her to then pass the comment or questions to the speakers. Finally, a point that is important, that please, you're also welcome to make questions. If you feel uncomfortable to be named, or you want to make the comment anonymously, you can also do it by using the online form. Is available on our ASTRO2020 pages. So just go to the pages, and there is a form you can use, and the question will be sent to us. We are live streaming on YouTube, so please be aware, especially people that are on Zoom, please be aware that this is live streamed. If you're uncomfortable with that, we ask you to please leave the meeting. You can still, as I said, follow the meeting on YouTube, and you can also interact with our speakers through the chat on YouTube or through the form or the questionnaire. Finally, a point that is very important for us at EASE. We trust in the code of conduct. We have a code of conduct, and we trust and we aim at creating a comfortable atmosphere where everyone, all opinions are welcome, and all comments are very welcome. But please behave professionally, show tolerance and respect for the views of others. We aim at creating a comfortable environment for everyone. And there are 2 contact points. One is myself, Giacomo Beccari. The other contact point is Anna Miotello, who is the chairperson of today. So all participants, please feel free to report any violation of the guidelines to myself or Anna, and we will act in full confidence, of course, in case it is necessary. With that, I would like to thank you all. I would like to please enjoy the conference. I would like to again reinforce my thanks to our speakers and to the chair today. As I said, the chair today is Anna Miotello. Anna is a staff member at ISO. She works in the ARC node in the ARC at ISO, and she's an expert of protoplanetary disks on the planet formations. She's a great scientist, a fantastic person, and it's a pleasure. It's a big friend, a great friend. So it's a big pleasure for me to let the floor to Anna for the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giacomo. Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, I'm very happy to be chairing this session today that is indeed on mental health and the imposter syndrome. And these are topics that are becoming more and more interesting and crucial for us astronomers. They start to be discussed on an interpersonal level, but also on a, say, more institutional level. The point is that not so often we are able to have also professional psychologists, for example, talking to us about these topics. And that's why we have invited today two professionals, and together with them, we will also have the contribution of three astronomers. So we can start right away with the first invited speaker, who's Eva Pulchenitska. She's a psychologist and a neuroscientist, and she's the founder of PhD Success, which is a route through which Eva helps PhD candidates to understand their mental challenges and guide them to a long-standing change and so they can get back in charge of their PhD. So the title of her talk is How to Become a More Productive, Confident, and Happier Researcher in a World Where the Sky is Not the Limit. So with that, I give the floor to Eva, and I'm very, very happy to hear her talk.
Okay, yeah, so thank you so much for the introduction. And let me just say that I'm extremely honored to be here, and I would like to welcome all the attendants and also thank you all for the invitation to this conference. And let me share just before I start something very personal that really touched me, is that when I was a master's student, not being really sure about my career, one of my professors who really inspired me to do research used to say that there are the two most beautiful and unknown things. One is the space, and the other one is human brain. And so I went to that side and studied psychology and neuroscience and spent over 10 years in that field. But actually, space and the sky always really impressed and passioned me. And so today I'm really honored to bring a part of my universe to you and share it with you. So let me just jump to the content of the presentation. Okay, all right. Sorry, just view. Enter full screen. All right. Can you see it now? All good? All right. So yeah. So I will be also honest with you. I'm not doing rocket science. Okay. So it would be maybe not that surprising. Certainly, you heard about mental health. You thought about mental health. Maybe you also went or are going through some issues related to mental health. And the interesting part about mental health is actually that when you look at mental health, there are two words. There is mental and there is health. And it is actually pretty surprising because this separation makes us think that there are two separate entities and mental health is not a part of health, whereas actually it is. So what makes the mental part so special? Well, this mental part was really stigmatized for a long time, and we associated mental health, mental diseases with some sort of craziness. Later on, we thought that mental health is those, let's say, more serious mental diseases such as schizophrenia, autism. But later on, we also saw that there are other diseases, let's say, of a different weighing, such as depression, burnout, anxiety. But to be honest, mental health is much, much more than that. Mental also means just waking up happy at the morning, waking up excited to start the day, being able to sleep properly, being able to enjoy life. And so this part is really mental. Now, what is the health stands for? Well, you know, for a very long time, I used to think that health is, okay, if I have a flu, I take some pills and then it's gone. So, you know, it's something that is very curable and that goes fast. But actually, while I was working as a neuroscientist with my colleagues in the medical things, I realized, and that was actually quite a revelation for me, that health is something that is constant and that is ongoing process. So actually, most of the diseases are not like flu. They are, when they are there, they stay there. So we can think about allergies, for example. If they are there, we have them all along our life. If we have a heart condition, we have it all our life. And that actually made me realize something that I kind of knew, but I was not aware, that it is the it is also those oh, sorry. I just lost the track. So yeah, you see, this is it. This is also the part of health. Yeah, so I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so health is like this really very much ongoing process, and actually, what we also observe in the health issues is that what is really, really important is the prevention. And we have seen it, especially with COVID, that a lot of efforts have been put in prevention. And this is a better way of going, preventing rather than curing afterwards. But actually, when we look at the data in academia and we talk about mental health, we actually see that there is something that we are doing wrong. There are research that are showing that PhD candidates in particular, that was a very revealing study of Evans et al. In 2018, show that many of the PhD candidates suffer from moderate to severe depression or the moderate to severe anxiety, and that they were 6 times more likely to develop mental health disease than the general population. More importantly, that studies have been repeated in different populations of different PhD candidates in different countries and over different fields. And I think we will also get to that later on in the presentations today. But they show that the ratio might vary, but still in academia, we're actually amplifying the mental suffering, and especially young researchers are at a higher risk of developing mental health disease than other individuals of the same age working outside of academia. So very clearly, there is something that we are doing wrong. But what are we doing wrong? Well, luckily, there is more and more research about it, and it becomes less of a taboo. So the reasons that are most commonly coming back, and those risk factors, well, this is project and supervision related issues related to the isolation and loneliness, because we are very much on our own with our research, future career, productivity, time, self-doubts, and also sometimes financial insecurity. And so that has been revealed in several studies. And for me, who is actually working with academics individually, but also with the institutions, and I also run the online community, I see personally very much this pressure of time and of productivity, but also very much I see the self-doubt. And this is actually what I would like to really address today, is this unwritten link between productivity, confidence, and happiness. And so first, starting with the productivity. Well, productivity is something that is very prized in academia. We are in this culture where it's actually good to work a lot. We're encouraged to work a lot. and it's even expected to work a lot. And I would say work is a solution in a way, hard work is a solution in a way. This is a perception that many of the people will have. For example, when clients are reaching out to me, PhD students, they say, yes, I am stressed, but I would be less stressed if I worked more, if I worked better. Or, yeah, I don't think confident enough because my results are not good. But this is because if I'm more productive, then my work would look better. You know, so more I work, the better it will get. And the problem is that it actually gets better, because when you work more and you produce more, well, then you have more ongoing things as well. So you can more achievements, you can get to the more interesting collaborations, you will do more have more publications, you can also reach more prestigious grants, and basically you have a better career perspectives. And nothing wrong with that. For most of the researchers, they really don't mind it, because research is a passion, and actually spending those hours working is the best thing for them. I had recently someone telling me that she loves her Sunday afternoons where she can actually sit by herself and just analyze her data. So that was like the Sunday leisure thing, because the work is rewarding, it is a pleasure for us, and often it gives us a sense of purpose. So we're actually ready to make efforts for our work. But this is also a danger of that in a way. So let me just support what I'm just saying here with some numbers. So this is actually the research that I came across really very recently, thanks to Julian Bautista from the University of Marseille, who actually gave me access to this research and pointed it to me. So it's a very recent survey from the French Astrophysics Society that was conducted in France last year. And it was interviewing 274 researchers working in the French institutions, and they were at the different levels of their career. And they were asked how many hours they are working in average. And most of the researchers were working 41 to 50 hours, some of them 51 to 60, but there were also some that were working almost 90 hours. And just for a reference, the expected working time, the legal working time in France is 35 hours. So you see that most of us, we are almost doing double, but still in the same study, most of the researchers expressed a high satisfaction of their work, saying research is the best, agreeing actually with the statement that research is the best job that I can have. And there was really a very, very important amount of people, almost all of them said that they really enjoyed the intellectual challenge that the research was bringing them. So we see also here that it's also rewarding. And I just want to show like the bigger spectrum. So that was a mental health. So that was a Nature survey in 2017 that kind of revealed actually the mental health issues in academia. And I was pioneering all this work about mental health. And in this research, in this survey, well, it was shown that many PhD students actually suffered from the mental health issues, but still the level of the PhD satisfaction was very high, over 77%, showing that even though these people who suffer from mental issues, they still enjoy the research. So there are 3 lessons that we can actually learn from that. Well, hard work, well, is a solution for everything, including mental health. Second, working even long hours is rewarding. And the third is that actually we don't mind working a lot, and we are ready to give up a lot in order to make it happen. And so that brings us to really creating this an identity, me as a researcher. And I have last year I have participated in the second international conference of well-being of researchers. And one of the major topics was actually what we can do to fit non-academic identities because of the junior researchers, because me as a researcher becomes really a value. And as that, we are neglecting all other fields of our life, such as our personal life. So being a good mother, being a good spouse, good girlfriend, friend, our physical activities, how we feel in our body, hobbies, interests, all that becomes way less important or even inexistent, well, when we have a work to do. And we are the researchers. So that actually works very well if we work well and we obtain the results that we want, and that actually makes us feel happy. But the flip side of that is that when the things are not going our way, when we are not getting the results that we want to get, well, that actually gets to us so much. And it's not about work anymore. It is about us as people, as human beings. It's very much about our identity. And so here we're really getting to this link between productivity and confidence, and really something about confidence. So this is another study of 2018 on the PhD candidates showing that with the work overload, most of 47% of the candidates are under constant stress. But I would like to draw your attention to something more. 15% felt worthless. And I mean, this is really alarming, especially like you're really doing the rocket science, right? And I mean, we have those great intellectually challenging jobs but still we feel worthless. That's very alarming. And that actually shows that, when the work is not going well and we are not, and that actually shows how much we are defining ourselves by our work. And this lack of confidence is also visible on the other issues that are very present in academia, such as impostor phenomenon, fear, which is actually feeling that you're not enough for something, that you feel that you don't deserve the recognition, perfectionism and feel of failure, right? Like we want to do it like super good and still we're very afraid to fail. Procrastination and those procrastinator blogs where we think, well, I don't know how to do it. Maybe I shouldn't even start doing it. And other things are, of course, communication issues where we are not able to express exactly what we need in a different moment and articulate it. And the uncertainty of the value of our PhD, of our work, and of course, the uncertainty about the future. And yesterday, I really had a great pleasure following the session about the metrics and about the evaluations. And I found it so true and so the half of the day actually devoted just to evaluation, just to metrics, that really shows the importance of those metrics, of this evaluation. And that actually means that every time we will be confronted to, getting a feedback, positive, negative, but we will be evaluated. And when there is evaluation, there always comes an improvement. So we are, regardless of the level of the research that we are at, whether we are junior researchers or more senior, more experienced researchers, every time we need to report to someone, it will be either PhD students to their supervisors and getting corrections, but also more advanced researchers writing grants, sometimes not getting them. And this is, or even like the entire peer review process. So it becomes like the improvement becomes the thing. And then the sky is not the limit. So how much can you actually improve and make it all better? And here we get to happiness. So happiness Well, it's very easy. I think you get me here. If you're productive, you have a good day of work, you get the results that you want, well, then your confidence goes up, you feel confident, you feel sure of yourself, and overall, you feel happy. Whereas, as we know, in research, it doesn't always go like that. And very often, we might have bad days, or we might have no results or some weird results of our research. We might not receive a grant, we might not get a position. And that actually brings us to feeling incompetent, slow, not good enough. And then where is happiness with all that? Well, if there are no other parts of our life that are there to lift us up, well, very quickly, we will feel unhappy, disappointed, stressed, and even depressed. So you see, this really interaction is very, very tricky. And so what are the solutions to that? Well, if we think about, this constant improvement and about the notion of feedback, we really get to something very basic, which is a scheme of human behavior, so the base of human behavior. And here I invite you to think really about the child that is learning to walk and that is doing his first steps. Well, it's cute, but it's also very clumsy, very inefficient, right? But still, the child will keep doing the steps, but will get so much help from the parents who will be giving him hand. Come on, one more step, one more step. Grandparents, all the surrounding will be encouraging him. Yes, bravo, one more step, one more step. And finally, the child himself, herself, will also see that she is doing the progress. So there will be one step more in that, one step more. And his own progress will actually also lead to the improvement. And this is actually something that we're probably not doing enough in academia, is really following this feedback. So we're very used to giving feedback, and the feedback can be at the different levels, all right? So there is a feedback, let's say, from our superiors. Doesn't mean necessary supervisors, but again, at all levels, we have this evaluation that comes at the end. So then there can be either a reward, so a positive result, or a punishment, so a negative result. But what is really the worst in all this process is not having an answer. So I don't know if you have experienced that, but sometimes we do an applications for a postdoctoral position, for example, or we're asking for a grant and we just don't have an answer. And then when we follow, oh yes, it got lost. Or so it's just, not having the answer is the worst. But anyway, this feedback, okay, is so important. And this feedback is also coming at the different levels. So it's a feedback that can come from our superiors, but it's also a feedback that comes from our peers. So, we can have, like we are doing it here right now, we will have a discussion, right, that I'm really looking forward to. So we will be sharing the knowledge and putting the knowledge together. So this is really a peer support. And then at the end, there is also your self-appreciation. So this is the feedback that you're giving yourself. And that can actually, we can look at it, at the productivity level. For example, you write an article and then you get a feedback from your supervisor saying, all right, thank you, I got it. It's very encouraging, like just to know that, okay, the person is getting it and reading it. And I mean, I can give you a lot of examples of those feedback that works. For example, another example that comes to my mind just now is one of my individual clients who also told me that she was writing her first article And then in the email, her supervisor said, well, this is an excellent beginning. And then when she opened the file, it was all red with so many corrections. But she kept, before she started working on it each time, she kept coming back to this email and repeating herself, yes, this is an excellent beginning. And that was actually encouraging her to work. And I think I actually captured myself on that sometimes as well. When I was supervising master's students myself, I would open their work and I would say, all right, so what's going wrong here? You know, and I would just look for the mistakes, whereas the appreciation of their efforts was sometimes disappearing. Then there is a feedback from our peers. So who are our peers? Where our peers are mainly those people that are at our level, all right? So PhD students, for example, community as a researchers, those people with whom we can share our challenges. And there is a lot of knowledge in that. So, you know, there are some things that you cannot share with your superiors, but you can share them very easily with your peers and saying, for example, yeah, well, I wrote the methodology overnight. And then your peers will say, oh, cool, you did it so fast. That's great, you know. This is like this feedback that you can get from the peers, but also knowledge sharing from the peers, how to write it, what you do to write faster. And then there is a self-appreciation. So the self-appreciation is really, okay, what do I do to reward myself for my efforts? And one of those things could be having a time off, for example. Okay, I produced it, now it's done, and I'm not working on it. With the confidence, well,
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so with the confidence, it's pretty much the same. You know, if you get the positive feedback, again, we can do it at so many levels. Positive feedback, you know, one of my clients also failed the Marie Curie project, so she's on the waiting list right now. But she said, actually, I should feel bad, but I feel good because I got so many positive comments. There were, of course, the negative comments, but I really see how I can improve my work right now. So that if we balance it, the reward and the punishment, let's say, we can actually very much improve just this feeling of happiness and how we feel and confidence. Feedback from our peers, the same. Just a friend saying, well, good job, you're doing great. And the self-appreciation. And here again, I find it very often in my clients that they think, well, I'm not good enough. And they think I should do it faster. Whereas actually we should switch it a little bit and think, okay, positive self-talk. I did it. I tried. I did my best. And so here we're coming to happiness. So is this human behavior framework actually applying for happiness overall? Well, that's actually a bit more complicated because there are many elements that contribute to feeling happy, but still, because it's also an emotion and so on, but we can still really be creative about it. And yesterday we really spoke about the academic culture and all the things that we can do to change this culture and to make it a happier culture. And that starts really with us as individuals. So we can make this improvement, you know, it's like this little word saying, okay, it's a great beginning. It is a very encouraging thing already and make the other person feel better. And we have this power to do it on the individual level, but also to do it on our level and on the position that we have in academia, where we are at the beginning of our career, in the middle of, at the end. It is also something that we can do on the institutional level, because actually the culture is created by people. And we should not, we are complaining about the academic culture, but we are a part of it. We are actually creating it. And so I really invite you and challenge you and to think about what we can do for happiness in academia and from promoting, instead of complaining about mental health, what we can do actually to promote well-being. And I'm very much looking forward to our discussion later this evening on that topic. And I would just like to finish with this quote of Mark Twain. Well, very common, but they didn't know it was impossible, so they did it. Well, I think that you as researchers, you're doing things that were impossible 10, 20 years ago. Well, that means actually that the change is possible and that we should be creative and apply this quote that sky is not the limit, not only to our work and working habits and ambitions, but also to the academic culture and making academia a better and nicer place to work. So thank you very much for your attention. And yeah, I'm giving back floor to Anna.
Thank you very much, Eva, also for staying perfectly on time and for the very provocative, I would say provocative talk, because I'm already seeing in the chat many comments, especially on this part on the feedback, which I think we might take for the discussion afterwards, because I think there can be a big discussion. But I also see some more specific questions, so we have a few minutes for answering this question. I see one from YouTube, where Dario asks, what is the comparison with the population at similar educational level but not working in academics? I think he was referring to the first percentages that we were showing, with this 40% of the young scientists suffering moderate to severe depression and anxiety. So was there a comparison with people not in academia at the same age?
Yes, exactly. So that was it. So when we speak in psychology about the population of reference, we are actually, and in that study in particular, but also in all the studies, we are actually taking people in academia. So in that case, that was PhD students of a certain age, and they were compared with individuals of similar level of education. So that would be probably people having master degrees, engineering degrees, you know, those higher degrees, working outside of the academia.
Okay, thanks a lot for the clarification. And there was also another question, an anonymous question asking, isn't it true that the severity of depression someone experiences can enhance the feeling of being worthless? Is this 15% of people feeling worthless may also fall into the category of people diagnosed of suffering from severe depression?
Oh, wow, that's a long question. Could you just repeat it? I'm sorry,
Yes, so basically the question says, so we see this 15% that feels worthless, yes. But this person asks, I know this is also a feeling that people in the category that are diagnosed as suffering from severe depression could feel. So is this 50% being the same people that could be heavily depressed?
Absolutely, absolutely, because the questionnaires that they used in those studies were actually questionnaires that we are using to standardized questionnaires that we are actually using to classify depression, anxiety, and other mental issues of that type, definitely. And actually, this feeling of worthless is one of the one of the feelings that we have when we have a depression. So it also serves us to define, to diagnose the depression.
Okay, thanks a lot. So again, I see in the slide a long, they are starting already a discussion on the importance of feedback, positive or negative. And I think this will require much longer time for discussing it. So I would keep it for the discussion afterwards. I'm seeing a final question. Yeah, so a person asked, I also have a question regarding the statistics of mental health in academia. Did you see if the values were equally distributed between men and women?
Yeah, and that is actually a very, very interesting question. And to be honest, I had that, I also did a presentation recently in Marseille, and we had a very similar discussion. And the studies, so, okay, if we focus on the general study, okay, there is no agreement on that. Some of the studies actually show that there is no difference between women, like women and men suffering from those mental health risks in academia, whereas other studies are showing that there is a difference and that women are going through more challenges, for example, being a principal caregiver. So there are those studies. And for example, the study that I went across recently, the one from the French Astrophysics Society, shows that difference. So I do believe that there are differences also specific to the field. And I think we have a discussion, presentation coming on that later on. So I get it that probably in your field, it is indeed an issue.
Thank you very much, Eva. So with that, I thank you again. I see more and more questions coming up. So please, people in the meeting, keep those questions for later. So we'll discuss it after the coffee break. And I will then start with I will give the floor then to the second speaker, who is Paula Piniglia. She is a research group leader at MPIA. And starting from August this year, she will be an associate professor at the University College of London. Scientifically, she's an expert on planet transformation, but today I think she will talk to us as a mother in astronomy, or as her talk is indeed Mothers in Astronomy. So the floor is yours, Paula.
Thank you very much, Anna. And thank you very much, the organizers, for giving me this opportunity. I'm very happy to present this talk here today. So the idea of the talk is first to show you some studies that focus on the parenting penalties faced by scientist mothers. Then I'm going to briefly talk about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on mothers in academia. And then after, I would like to introduce some ideas and policies of how to get and keep mothers in academia. And finally, I will use the last minutes to talk about a project that we started a couple of months ago that we call Mothers in Astronomy. So let me start with the first part. And with that, I want to present this paper from 2007, which is entitled Getting a Job, Is There a Motherhood Penalty? Basically, it's based on a social experiment as the ones that they introduced on Tuesday, in which they distribute to a diverse group of people CVs. And in this particular experiment, the only difference between the CVs were it was the parental status. And the main results of this work are that mothers were 43 less likely than non-mothers to be recommended for hire. Mothers were rated as less competent, less promotable, and less likely to be recommended for management. And they were given lower recommendations for starting salaries. On the other hand, fathers were rated the opposite. They were rated more competent, more capable, and fathers were not penalized by their parental status. In fact, they were benefited by them. And this study was not focused in academia, but there is a similar study recently by the Organization of Mothers in Science, in which they conducted a survey in 2020 to around 9,000 people from 128 countries. The summary of the results are in this paper from Career Nature. And it's important to say that the people who answered, 58% were mothers, 22% were women without children, 13% were fathers, and 7% were men without children. The main results are that more than 1/3 of mothers in full-time careers in STEM globally had left those positions after their first child. And scientist mothers published fewer papers compared to scientist fathers. And they quantified that by 9 years after their first child, mothers had, on average, published 10 fewer papers than fathers. And 38% of the scientist mothers worldwide say that they receive fewer offers for professional opportunities since they became a mother, compared to only 30% of scientist fathers. And 61% of the scientist mothers compared to 38% of scientist fathers said that parenthood had a negative effect on their careers. But as you can see, also this poll of people were very biased towards mothers. But there is another study that is more balanced and is published in this paper by Science Advances, in which they sent a survey between 2017 and 2018 to around 3,000 tenure track faculty members from 450 institutes in the US and Canada in 3 different fields: computer science, history, and business. And the main results of this study are that mothers in the sample published between 74 to 83% fewer papers than fathers during 15 years span early in their careers. Of these 15 years, they have studied 5 years before the child and 10 years after the child. And the results are that 5 years before a researcher's first child, future mothers and future fathers' productivity rate were nearly identical. With the arrival of the first child, the mother's productivity drops immediately by around 48%. This drop in productivity was not seen for researcher fathers or for non-parents who are at the same age or at the same career stage. And the analysis found in the field of computer science that on average, the mothers in this 10 years span after they have the first child, they publish 18 fewer papers than the researcher fathers. And they conclude that this gap to close it will take around 5 years of extra work. Let me now move to the impact of the pandemic on mothers in academia. And here, I guess I don't have to explain why there had been an impact for the parents during this time, basically because of the closure of childcare facilities and schools. And there have been several studies showing how this have affected the mental health of parents. Also, it have shown, some studies have shown that the production of women during this time has decreased. Here in particular, I want to show you the results of this paper that is continuously evolving. And in this paper, they sent a survey to 900,000 individuals who had published at least one academic article in the last 5 years. And they took a large range of journals. And up to the moment where they published the paper, they have 27,991 responses. And here what you can see is the mean number of hours spent in different activities before the pandemic, included research and other work that is also part of their jobs. And you can see that in research, female and male individuals spend a similar time, as well as in housework is relatively similar. And there was already a gap in childcare time. These are the changes in the number of hours spent on each of these activities by gender. And you can see that female individuals are spending less time in research than male during the pandemic. And also that the gap of the time spent in childcare has increased. And also the housework the gap has increased. Here I'm showing you the changes in the number of hours spent on research by gender and depending on the number of children. And I found this very interesting because it shows that independent of the number of children, the gap is very clear. But it strongly depends on the age of the children. So here is the same, is the changes in the number of hours spent on research as a function of the age of the children. And you can see how both female and male individuals are spending less time on research if the children are young. And this decreases with the age of the children, and also the gap closes when they have teenager children. So the main conclusions of this work are that female academics, particularly those who have children, report a reduction in time dedicated to the research time that they had before, and is less that if you compare with men or women without children. Both men and women reported increase in the childcare and housework time, but women experienced larger increase than men did. Now I would like to tell you about some ideas and policies that are in place in order to attract and keep women in academia. So the first advice, and many of these are based on recommendations given by the Mothers in Science organization. And the first advice is awareness, because motherhood is a very valid reason to reduce productivity, but it's still a big battle in academia. And it's important to be aware that the most physically and emotionally demanding times of motherhood, which are pregnancy, delivery, recovery, and breastfeeding, often coincide with the time in which the research in the push up of the career ladder from the first years of the PhD to the first independent positions. Another advice is to include a field on the CV to account for maternity leave. This is common in some applications for grant funding, but it's not so common when you apply for PhDs or postdoc positions, and also even for faculty positions. Including this in the CV or in the form that you need to apply for a job may increase the fairness of the competition. And funding agencies need to make family-friendly policies among graduate students, postdocs, and principal investigators. For example, for the ERC, mothers get 18 months. And they can apply even 18 months for each child that they have. In any of the grants that they get 18 months more of this time. Depending on the grant that they are going to apply. The question is this 18 months is enough according to these studies. For fathers, one of the recommendations is also to take parental leave, because if we also see our male colleagues take parental leave, this will help to make the situation better for mothers. And the recommendation is to follow the Iceland model, in which the maternity leave is around 11 months, in which 6 months are given to one of the parents and the other 6 months to the other, with 1 month in between for transition. Another suggestion and policies that are in place are funds to support doctoral students and postdoctoral mothers. For example, the Max Planck Society had a pilot program that ended last year. I guess because it was a pilot program, they are probably in discussion, that supports young scientists, PhD students and postdocs with 400 euros per month, that they are aimed to spend in whatever they need, basically to buy some freedom and cope with their duties. For example, by hiring a nanny a couple of days a week, or paying after school service, or even bringing the parents to home to take care of the child. You don't need to explain how you are using this money. And there is a similar program by this foundation. It's the same amount of money, and it's actually up to 2 years of the birth of the child. Another suggestion is to offer daycare to female and male participants in conferences, and also when you invite someone to give a talk at your institute, in the invitation you can provide information on potential daycare at that place. And finally, to provide an office, a private office or room to the mothers that are coming back to work to express the milk. And if they are in faculty jobs, relieve them from teaching duties or other type of institutional duties once they become parents. And I want to spend the last couple of minutes to introduce you a project that we started together with Maria Claudia Ramirez Tanos, who is a postdoc at the MPI, Marta Irene Saladino, who did a PhD in astronomy in Amsterdam, and now she's a science communicator, and she works at Google, and myself. And the idea of this project is to raise awareness of the barriers faced by mothers in astronomy, give a little recognition to mothers working in astronomy in different stages of their career, and create collective empowerment of mothers in our field by inspiring and supporting each other. So what we did is a survey with the following questions. We asked the name, institution, position, country, number of children, and a picture. And we asked 4 questions. The first one was, what do you enjoy the most about being a mother? The second one is, what has been the biggest challenge that you have experienced when combining motherhood with the academic life? Has the pandemic impacted your career and your family in the last couple of years? And if you are a senior mother, like a mother of teenager children, what you would recommend to the young mothers who are struggling during the COVID-19 pandemic, and which positive aspects or effects has motherhood had on your career? And the idea of this survey is that we will publish it in May of this year in a digital book. Our science communicator, she's working in a nice visualization. We are going to close the form at the end of this month. We started by sending this survey to mothers that we knew, and we asked those mothers to give us names of other mothers in astronomy, or to just forward the email to other mothers. And at the moment, we have around 60 responses. Most of them are senior, which I mean women who are mothers who are in permanent jobs. They come from different countries around the world. We have mothers of a different number of children, 1, 2, 3, 4, even 5. And if you're interested on getting the form and answer it, please contact me. We are also hoping that we can advertise and promote this book in different institutes. So if you would like to have a press release, for instance, at your institute about this book, once it's published, please also contact me. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Paula, for your talk. I was reminded I can actually ask people to ask the questions themselves. So this is what I'm going to do. I already see some questions in the chat. So Monica Marra, maybe can ask her question. Otherwise, I don't see her, so I can ask the question myself. So maybe something similar to what you described, Paula, applies to women as family caregivers in general, independently of them being mothers.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know actually. The studies I have read are focused on mothers, so I don't have any data supporting that.
Okay, thanks a lot. So the other question I have here written is from Markus Witkowski. If he wants to ask the question himself, please.
No, I can. I was asking whether there are also some fathers who have the same problem as the majority of mothers. And what I mean is there are also single fathers or fathers who take the majority of the childhood tasks in a family. So I was wondering if they would then have the same problems, or can they cope better with it, or maybe have better support, or co-workers don't suspect that they also have family tasks. So I was wondering if there's any numbers maybe in the study or anything else you know about it. So whether kind of a single mother, for example, would have more problems than a single father.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The studies I present you, they compare mothers and women without children and fathers and men without children among them, but there is no comparison of single mothers and single fathers. So I also, to my knowledge, based on these studies, I don't know actually an answer to your question. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Paula. And maybe a last question before we go on from Rainer Mauesberger. Let's see if he can, otherwise I can read it in myself. Do you see an opportunity created through the pandemic? Because in the future, online conference and meetings will be more common than before. This could favor fathers and mothers who have to care for children. So I guess the question is indeed, maybe we have improved the mothers and fathers situation by having more conferences that can also go online. What is your feeling about that?
My personal opinion is yes, of course. I think that this is the situation is more inclusive for mothers and fathers. And from the response of our survey is something that it seems also a common denominator in the feelings of most of the mothers in astronomy is that there is less pressure for traveling, and that in the future they will consider traveling. They will think more about it. So yes, I think this there is positive aspects of the pandemic for the mothers and fathers. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Paula. Yes, I see that some discussion has also developed here on how much then the agendas of this online conferences are doable for mothers and fathers. So I think we can also have a larger discussion later on this. And I would also like to ask the other people to keep the questions that we put in the chat for later, because now we are a bit running out of time. So I thank Paula again for her talk and for the question that we received. And I would like to introduce then our second contributed speaker of today, who is Jacob van den Eyden. He is a Lee Heisen Junior Research Fellow in Physical Science and St. Hilda's College and postdoctoral researcher in astrophysics in the physics department. Also, very relevant to this session of today, he is the member of the SOC of the special session Early Career Astronomers and their supporters at the ASTRO2022. And the talk of today so the title of the talk of today is How to Support Early Career Astronomer and Early Career Astronomer Perspective. So please, Jacob, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Let me reshare my screen now with my mic unmuted. And go to full screen. Yes, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Anna. Thank you all for joining today. It's nice to see so many people join on what is a very important non-research topic. I think it's always lovely to see so many people that are interested in this. And I also want to say thank you to the organizers for this session. The original person that was going to give this talk, as I'll explain later, couldn't give it, and the organizers did reach out to make sure that there was someone else to give this talk. So we are very grateful for that. So indeed, my name is Jacob, and I want to talk about how institutes, departments, and all of us in a way can support early career astronomers. And I've renamed this talk an early career astronomer perspective, because a lot of this will be based on conversations and experiences that we've had ourselves as people that are going through a PhD or a postdoc. So this talk is, as it says here, in collaboration with Floor Broekgaarden, who was originally the one that proposed to give this talk. So for those of you who don't know Floor is very active in supporting early career researchers, connecting people, getting resources together for that. But when she's not working on that, she's of course also doing very interesting research. She's a PhD student at CFA Harvard, and her scientific research work is on binary evolution and compact object mergers. So I put her website here in case you're interested in either all the resources that she's compiled on these topics or on her scientific work. So I am indeed a research fellow at the University of Oxford, and I normally talk about accretion and studies of that, but now I'd like to talk about the early career research support. So this talk is going to be a bit different than the previous two, which were very much based on actual data and actual surveys. What this talk is based on is quite different. This is what Floor originally intended was for this to be a talk with a list of about 10 recommendations for people that she had based on her experiences talking to people and organizing, for example, early career astronomers days at conferences like the EAS last year and this year as well. And I have collaborated quite a lot with her in organizing these things. And so I sat down with her and basically compiled with her a list of recommendations of a few things that we have seen coming back in conversations with people and during these more structured discussion days and discussion sessions, and what we have learned from that. So this is going to be a very biased view. It's also going to be a completely incomplete view of these things. And I think it's mostly meant to spur up discussion for the end of the day, because people will have different views and different ideas. And I think that's the main goal of this, to get people think about this actively. So this talk is also therefore aimed not at either the early career astronomers or their supporters, but really basically aimed at both of these groups. It's based at the people that want to support them, that are maybe from a, let's say, a higher level within an institute or within a department on a more staff permanent level. But also those early career astronomers that see support available around them, but want to reach out to it and want to access this. And this is also because I think it's very often difficult to define exactly when you are early career and when you're not early career anymore. When I'm giving this talk, I do feel a lot like I'm an early career astronomer myself. But when I'm talking to a master's student, for instance, that wants to apply for PhD positions, at that point, I am in a completely different relationship with that person. So also this umbrella term is, of course, very, dependent on the circumstances. I should also stress that, of course, because this is a biased talk, it's not going to be complete, and it's going to be inspired by what Floor and I have experienced and heard from people, which means that there's a lot of things that it will not cover. One of these things, importantly, that it will not cover is actually how people become an early career astronomer in the first place. This is about supporting people when they get into that position, but of course, there's many issues into getting in that position in the first place. There's many differences, many inequalities in that, of course, as well, in terms of opportunities, which is a very important topic, but not something that I know very much about, so not something that I would feel comfortable speaking about. So I won't cover that to make sure I'm not talking about something that I don't feel comfortable about. So after Floor reached out to me to see if I could give this talk in her place, we had a long conversation about what she was going to say and trying to compile some of these pieces of advice. And based on that, we came up with these sort of 3 umbrella terms. And I'll go into these 3 in a bit more detail to give some examples of how to do that. And we basically gotten these 3 terms from basically all the input that we've gotten from people at these discussion days. And I think it can be summarized as effective support networks and structured support networks around people. The encouragement of very active participation of early career researchers within communities and within institutes, and very clear communication and information at the moments when it's needed, so that it's very easily available. Again, incomplete list, and you're all welcome to add anything in the discussion, of course. So with effective support networks, what we mean there is really structured support ways to include people in our community. So I think this is something that is especially important now. It's always important, but with a lot of people now getting back to the office, or hopefully soon getting back to the office, it may be the first time that a postdoc that has been somewhere for 2 years is actually physically going to enter the university and physically going to interact with the people around them. One way to build a support network like this in a constructive way is to think of something like a peer support system, for example. So a system where every time you have a new master or PhD or a student or postdoc coming in, you couple them proactively with someone in that same role who has been there for a while, but preferably also still remembers what it's like to come into that position. So they can help them with very practical issues. I mean, you can think of simple things like where are the printers in the building, but of course, much more importantly, to help them actually integrate into the community, become part of the social network of an institute, of a department, and make sure that they don't feel alone from the onset. And if I speak from my personal experience, the past 1.5 years I've been here in Oxford, but it was about 6 months before I could go physically into the building where I worked, and it's been very strange to go through a process like this in a pandemic. And I think in a situation like that, having people that are really proactively taking you to things and including you can be very important. A very different way, which has nothing to do with the pandemic, is in terms of creating a support network, is to ensure and encourage that people don't have a small list of advisees and mentors and supervisors, but that they actually try to create as large a network of mentors to create and to foster. So what I mean by that is something that is often summarized in images like this. This is from a graduate student mentoring guide from the University of Michigan, where you basically try to take all the aspects of your research career and try to step away from the idea that you need to have 1 or 2 advisors or supervisors that can actually fulfill all these roles within your career. So if you look at this specific example, it's split up between academic duties and academic goals that you may have, such as the actual advising on your research, giving you access to different opportunities career-wise. There's professional examples such as just career guidance and discussion, the intellectual community that you work with around you. But also for today, especially very importantly, the well-being side of things. So role models, people creating safe spaces for discussion, and of course your personal emotional support. And you will not probably find a single person or a handful of people to fill all of these roles in your scientific life. And I think, and this is something that Floor introduced to me actually, that this is a very beautiful way to think about basically for yourself, how are these positions filled? Where do I find gaps, and where do I need to reach out or try to find people to talk with to help me in these aspects of my research career? Another thing in terms of building a support network is basically to try and do what we've been trying to do at things like the EAS and make a much more small scale local version of that. And I think that's actually much more effective than what we're trying to do at large meetings like the EAS. I think if you make small scale and local and regular meetups to actually actively discuss these things among early career researchers, that creates much more of a safe environment, much more of a known environment. You know the other people, and that will actually be much more effective than what we can do at these large meetings. A second point, the second umbrella term that we've noticed a lot is active participation, and it's basically to motivate and allow for very active participation of early career researchers in every aspect of your department. Again, this is going to be especially important if you find that your department and your community is returning to the office, and you now are suddenly find that there's a large number of people who've never been there before, never really interacted in this situation, and that can be really daunting and off-putting for people. So I think there's different ways to do this, and I want to highlight that Giacomo started out today with one of these things actually that we came up with, which is to really, in one way, for example, really promote and motivate people to take active roles during talks, during seminars, during colloquia, by asking questions to help yourself pay attention, but also to advertise yourself as an early career researcher, and then for the Institute to create space for that. So to make sure that when people want to ask questions, you give priority to early career people, to have people play a role in the hosting of a speaker, in the introduction of a speaker, in the Q&A session, and to give people the opportunity to, in a safe way and in a comfortable way, speak up and also interact and participate. Another way to do this is something that I've seen in a couple of places, which is through more formal representative structures. So where I did my PhD, this was called the council, where you have a couple of representatives from your PhD and from your postdoc community that talk to the staff level of your institute and actually directly discuss topics that affect their communities, which is, I think, important for a couple of reasons, obviously, because these communities are then represented in the discussions that concern them. But the people that are doing the representation can at the same time also learn a lot from that about how these sort of departmental structures work, and it's good for their own development and CV as well. Now, I want to highlight here something which is two quotes from a paper or an article called "The Time Is Now: Systematic Changes to Increase African Americans with Bachelor Degrees in Physics and Astronomy." This is a report that came out in the US a few years ago, and it has one of the first main recommendations that it says is the importance of creating a sense of belonging in this case, in order to increase the numbers of African Americans in the physics and astronomy community. And it says, for example, faculty and peer interactions have a very powerful effect on students' sense of belonging, which increases with the number of faculty who get to know the students as individuals and demonstrate support for their success. And later on, it also mentions how peer interactions are very important, especially in mitigating or exacerbating imposter phenomena and stereotype threat. When student clubs and organizations are inclusive and supportive of all students, they can provide valuable peer support. And I think this beautifully shows two things. It highlights what I just meant, that the inclusion of people, the active inclusion of people in your community is very important for this sense of belonging. It also highlights the importance of doing this in a very inclusive nature and realizing, of course, that not everyone is coming from the same background and that people will encounter these issues in different ways. And that we should always be very aware of that.
Jakob, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Perfect. So the final one is clear communication and information, and that is something that I think is much more formalized in a way, which is basically to say that if there is essential information that should be available very quickly, that is very important to have it available very quickly. And this has come up a few times in our discussion days. This can be information on, for example, mental health resources within your department or within your university, similar with the responses to cases of harassment, if you're a witness or if you're if this happens to you, and how this works with, for example, confidential advisors to make sure that all that information is very readily available, and also in a more general way, counsel when you're encountering any struggles during your early career stage. I should, of course, mention that this is not something that's specific to early career researchers, but also is relevant for early career researchers. In a similar way, having information on other, I'd say, more scientific topics very readily available, such as academic skills and trainings for those, and information on that is key, I think, to make sure that if it's there, people can actually find it. And I think a beautiful example of that is actually one that I wasn't aware of until Floor told me, which is about the NASA Hubble Fellowship Program, which used to be quite hard to apply for if you didn't know anyone that had successfully applied for that. It would be quite hard to know what they were looking for, what the sort of tone is, what the level is, what the requirement is to apply. But right now you can go to their website and you can basically go back and look at dozens and dozens of successful applications, look at the science cases, look at the CVs, look at the entire package, and see what people have done to be successful. And I think that's a beautiful example of making information that's incredibly relevant for early career researchers pretty freely available to make the playing field just a bit more level. It's still not going to be perfectly level, but I think these things help in making it more level. So that's the three umbrella terms. As I said, this is very biased, this is very limited, and I'm most looking forward to the discussion actually afterwards. I do want to highlight again that Floor's website that you can find very easily on Google has a big page with resources that is basically a sort of community web page where anytime we have these discussion days, or she finds something on the internet that's useful, or someone sends along something, it's included on that page. So it's a great resource if you want to read up on this in more detail. And I want to do a bit of advertising, which is that at EAS 2022, we're again organizing a session on this. So if you're interested in these topics, which I suppose you are if you're looking, and you're going to EAS, please do come and reach out, because I think it's also just very important for people just starting in the field to see that a lot of people are interested in this, and to see that a lot of people have heart for these topics. This is not only for our session, but as you can see on the left, there's many sessions that are relevant to everything that we've seen this week and that we're seeing this week. So if you are going to Valencia, then please come and do say hi. Similarly for the UK community, we're also doing this at NUM a few weeks later. So if you're in the UK community, also please do come along and say hi and participate. So that's it for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jakob. A very, very interesting talk. I already see, I don't see question, but I see a comment in the chat. So by Alessandro Ederocrite. And he says that in the astronomy, I think it's related to the active participation that you were talking about. And he's saying that the Department of Astronomy at the University of Warwick, after some colloquium, there is this initiative where the speaker is left alone with the PhD students or like young astronomers that can ask questions in a more relaxed environment. And it's something similar that we are also doing at the Joint Astronomical Colloquium here in Garching. So I think this type of initiatives are indeed probably useful.
Yeah,
okay.
if I can briefly reply to that, I think that's great actually, and that would have helped me a lot when I was a master's student or a PhD student at the start, especially. I think there is on the other hand, for people that are able to overcome the sort of social barrier of asking a question as a PhD student, for instance, there is an advantage of also having the more senior astronomers in the room, right? Which is that you are, in a way, you are highlighting yourself, and you are showing that you are able to listen to a talk and come up with a question and have a discussion with a speaker. So I think that those initiatives can help in taking away the pressure of having these people around, but at the same time that there's also, if you have more senior astronomers around, that can also be an advantage. But it's a double-edged sword in that aspect, I can imagine.
Yes, I've just received another question, sorry, for you, Jakob, which is, what do you feel academia can do to prepare early career astronomers for future ways of working and communicating, which might be the online formats more than pre-COVID era?
That's a very good question that I don't have a very good answer to that. I think so my experience here moving to Oxford in the pandemic has been that the more proactive people have been, the more welcome I've felt. And that's been the case for in-person meetings and online meetings. And I think taking the burden away from the person that's arriving, whether that's in person or online, can be incredibly helpful. But that's just going to be a very tiny part of it. And that's my own experience. So I wouldn't have a broader answer to that.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot. No, I totally agree that this is something that maybe people who are staying in one place don't realize so much as younger career astronomers who are moving around, of course. And I also see compliments to the compilation of resources that you posted on the slides. So
well,
very much appreciate
that all goes to Flora, I have to say. It's like we are all indebted to her in that effort.
Okay, so with that, I would thank you, Jakob, very much, and we can go to the last talk before the break, which is given by Lea Heckman. She's a doctoral researcher at the Max Planck Institute for Physics here in Munich. Lea is a member of the Max Planck PhD Net, which is a platform for exchange among the about 5,000 PhD candidates working at the 86 different Max Planck institutes of the Max Planck Society. So she will talk about mental health among PhDs in Germany's leading research facilities. Thank you very much, Lea, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. And I will start sharing my slides. So I will continue with the early career research perspective, just going back to data a bit more. And I'm giving this on behalf not of just the Max Planck PhD Net, but also the ASTRO2022 network. So first I want to explain a bit what it is. It's the network of doctoral researchers network. So in Germany, you have 4 big non-university research organizations. So the Max Planck Society, the Leibniz-Helmholtz Association, and also Fraunhofer. And all, like 3 of them, except for Fraunhofer, have a PhD net. So like a network of all PhDs. And together, and with one single institute in mind, we form the ASTRO2022 network. So this means we represent around 16,000 doctoral researchers all around Germany. And it's not just astrophysics. I mean, the people in Garching know there are some astrophysics in Max Planck, but it's basically all different kind of fields. And why we form together is because we want to assess and improve the working conditions and scientific environment for PhDs. Both in our institutions, but also on a political and far broader level, which is also nice for trying to present our insights at this conference to see what we can change and how we can change working in astronomy, since I'm doing astrophysics myself. And the way we do this is by organizing harmonized surveys. So in 2019, for the first time, we conducted a survey among all of the institutes. And we got around 30% response rate, which means we have 5,000 PhDs that answered our questions, which is quite nice, especially taking into account that the surveys take around 40 minutes because they're quite comprehensive from all of the data that we're collecting with 95 questions. And in 2020, we reported in single reports, and now we are trying to compile comparisons about different topics. What you can see here is just an overview of all of the different topics that we covered that we thought are important for PhD life. So starting at the working conditions, satisfaction, supervision, but of course also we focused on power abuse and mental health, since we felt it's two of very important and rising topics in academia at the moment. And the ones I want to present are the ones related to mental health and what we can learn from it, maybe as a society as a whole. And this also goes back a bit to our first talk today. So we evaluated the depression levels, or basically it's like evaluating how many % of students show symptoms of depression, which you can use one of the psychological questionnaires for. So we use the PHQ-9, probably Eva knows more about this. And what we found is that we have 15 to 18% of our PhDs show moderate to severe depressive symptoms. You heard that's raised above the normal levels quite a lot. We didn't find it as much as ever if we compare it inside Germany, but yeah. So here you can see the depressive levels that we found divided in the 3 big institutions that we have. So Helmholtz, Max Planck, and Leibniz. And the darker the color, the more severe the depressive symptoms are that we find. So basically, if you never filled one of these questionnaires, the questions that are asked if you had trouble falling asleep in the last 2 weeks and things like this. When we just compared that to the German population, since all of the institutes are based in Germany, and we selected the age group of 18 to 29-year-olds, we can see that using the same questionnaire about the German population, it's found that it's around 10%. And this should actually go down with socioeconomic status. So with a higher education, this should only be an upper limit for us, but we are almost double as high. Then the second one, trait that we evaluated is anxiety. So here we use the Spielberger State Trait Anxiety Inventory to evaluate the current state and the general state of anxiety among our PhDs. And we do find very high levels of anxiety, as you heard also in the first talk again. So roughly 38% show high trait anxiety and even more high states, so the current form of anxiety, which you can see in the same figures as before. So the darker, the higher the state of anxiety that we find. And citing this, one of the nature studies again, they also found, using a different evaluation tool, but they also found a very high level of 36% of anxiety levels among PhDs, which means it's not a German problem, it's not a problem of our organizations, but it's actually a problem of academia. And just as another comparison among the German population, we see that it should be 15 to 20% in our age group. And then, of course, we didn't want to stop there because we want to understand why. So luckily, we also had in the questionnaire a question about evaluating one's satisfaction with different factors of your work effect. And here we made a correlation of how satisfied you are with different factors in your PhD life, and then correlated it with the mental health scores that we have. And what you can see here is the bigger, darker, and more left the spot is, the more important this factor is. And I want to concentrate on the 3 most important ones, which we found to be workload, work environment and atmosphere, which is quite a broad term. So here we want to divide it into working conditions, the scientific environment, and power abuse. And as the third one, very important one for all PhDs, since we're dependent on it, it's supervision. And what I mentioned before going into detail is that actually if we see a trend, we see a correlation, but there's no causality we can really identify. So we try to interpret it using our insights and our experience, but all of the causalities that I will imply, of course, could go in a different way or have far more complex than they will seem. Just please keep that in mind, but we're all scientists, so I think that's fine. So the first factor was workload. So as we've seen before, we tend to have high working hours. Actually, we have very similar levels to the French study that was shown before. And the mental health scores do increase with higher working hours. The same comes to weekend work, especially if it's very regularly, and with holidays taken. And there it even starts at your perception of the freedom you have to take holidays. So what you can see here, for example, so in colors, in blue, you have no or low anxiety levels, and in red, you have the high, moderate or high anxiety levels. And the different bars represent the answers to the question, do you feel free to take days off? So the left bar says yes. So these are the people that feel free to take days off. And the 4 bars on the right are the ones that don't for different reasons. For example, pressure from one supervisor or because of a high workload. And we can see it already starts here, and we can see the same for how many holidays are taken, or also for how often people work on a weekend. The second correlating factor was working conditions, where we can see that less stable situations increase mental health scores. Mainly being on a stipend compared to a contract, because the stipends, especially here in Germany, don't offer you the social insurances and security that a contract does, and usually they do pay less, or also short duration of contracts. So what you can see here, colors are the same theme again, just now the bars are the answers to the longest duration of a contract that the PhDs had. And on the left-hand side, it starts with half a year to a year, and then it goes up with 1 year for each bar. So we can see the shorter the duration is, the more the anxiety levels increase, which makes sense since a PhD roughly takes 3 to 4 years, on average, mostly more. And then this does give you another factor of insecurity. And then for power abuse, we also, as I said, we focus on this topic a bit. So we asked about cases of bullying and sexualized harassment, where we can see that they do have an impact on the mental health symptoms that we see, and especially with increasing regularity. So what you can see here are the bars for if people have been subjected to bullying by a superior, and the left bar is the answers for never, and then it goes up with once, occasionally, monthly, weekly, and daily. Of course, with the very high regularities, luckily, it's really low statistics, so it doesn't happen too often, but still we can see a clear trend. Then another factor that I want to end with from the data side is supervision. So we can see that it's a key point, as you can see here. So that's the rating of your satisfaction with one supervision. So very satisfied are the bars on the left, going to very dissatisfied on the right. And I mean, we can see a clear trend. The question is now what makes up good supervision? And to be honest, I will not be able to answer that. I'm looking forward to the discussion if we have input on that. I think we already had something with the feedback discussions going on. One thing that we can look at from our data is that supervision is often dependent on one person. So what an idea that emerged in the Max Planck Society, for example, was the thesis advisory committee. So you would have once a year a meeting with more than one supervisor, but actually also have an external and informal one, for example, which would give some pressure away, which does have some impact on the mental health values, but not as much to explain the whole correlation. Then also the frequency of meetings. So we see that we ask how often people want to meet and how often they really meet. And if this doesn't match, no matter in which direction, if it's too little or too often with your supervisor, it does show an impact. Which goes hand in hand with supervision agreements, where things like this would be fixed by the beginning of your PhD and like could be discussed again. They do show an impact, but all of this doesn't explain the whole trend. So we see the key factor, but we really want to learn more about what we can do to improve it. And all of this I now want to shortly condense in a few recommendations that we compiled. The one thing is that as a whole society, we have to stop normalizing overwork in academia, which means one idea that we had, which might be cause some legal restrictions, but it's work hour tracking. So what we are not doing at the moment is balancing our periods of high workload, which we won't get rid of, and which is also good. I mean, we all like are motivated to work towards deadline and like finish it, but we also need to take care to take rest afterwards. So by actually tracking your work hours, this would be a bit more under control and a bit more normalized because the periods of rest are often not taken into account. Also, we need reasonable contact durations. If you don't know if you will get an extension and can finish your PhD, you will overwork just to do that, but not take the periods of rest. And we need to start changing the working culture. On the one hand side, by peer-to-peer networks like ourselves changing to take times off to do social activities together, but also by the supervisors and leaders in our fields to lead by example. Another point is to improve financial security. I think the first one is mostly for Germany, but it's also like, I mean, we all work full-time, we all work over hours, but most of us have part-time contracts. So it might actually be time to do a full-time pay for full-time work for all of the research that we are doing. The stipends, the way they work at the moment, have to be rethought because it gives chances to a lot of people, but also it doesn't give them the social security others have. And we have to adjust contact durations to the actual durations of a PhD. And then one important point is to redefine.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
Yeah, to redefine supervisor roles. So as I said, we are often dependent on one supervisor, and this is changing a bit, but it actually has to change that all of the responsibilities of grading, supervising, and funding lie with one person. And we have to identify required skills for our actually supervisors and leaders. So at the moment, most people are selected by their excellence in science, which is important, but also other skills are important. So we need mandatory leadership and supervision training, and we need to adjust recruitment criteria to this. And then, as I said, we need to think as a community also, what are supporting measures that we can introduce more broadly, where we can learn from each other, which are maybe working somewhere else already, as supervision agreements or thesis committees and so on. And as a short note at the end, also improve the scientific environment. So of course, we have to tackle power abuse by prevention. There are some statements by the N-Square network, if you want to have a look. It also goes a lot into the direction of the supervisory roles. And as already mentioned in the talk before, onboarding measures are very important. So we have to welcome new people, make sure that they know where to go, either by peer-to-peer, but also by clear information flows. And since mental health values are really increased, we have to accept that it's a problem and just make sure that everyone has access to help, either by knowing where to go in your health system, but also by services provided by the universities and institutions. And that brings me to my summary and outlook. So we see that we have a very high abundance of mental health symptoms among PhDs, and that working conditions and scientific environment can influence mental health of doctoral researchers very immensely. Financial security, prevention of power abuse, and healthy supervisory relationships are key factors how we can actually tackle this. And as a short outlook, we ran basically the same survey with a bit more question on the pandemic in the end of last year again, and we'll try to learn more and do comparison also with pre-pandemic data. And with this, I want to thank you. Here are some links to the different networks. You can find the different reports there as well. And some thank yous to everyone that worked on this and supported it.
Thank you very much, Leah, for the very nice talk, very informative talk. I was really impressed by the detailed statistical analysis that you have made. So that was really impressive. I don't see any question in the chat. Oh, I see that Giacomo has a raised hand. So I think that we have a question from Giacomo.
Yeah, Leah, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Leah. Absolutely. I mean, I'm learning. I mean, this is so important to us. So I question that the point that you made about the distribute or diversify the responsibility. I understand you mean in a supervisory team, in a sense, or this is similar to what Otto Jakob showed, I think, in a sense, to when he was showing this chart in which you inviting basically a PhD student or early career scientist to diversify the connections, basically, not assuming that the single supervisor can, cover all the fields, all your needs, basically. I was wondering, how do you foresee this? How do you recommend us to implement this? How do you, yeah.
So I think there are two aspects. One is really for the supervision and to fulfill your needs. And this has been started. We are trying to make a draft on how to implement this in the Max Planck Society on a whole. So the way it mostly works is you have a formal supervisor who's usually the professor who takes care of all of the funding, all of the decisions, all of the more formal decisions, and who you can also go to for like recommendations letter, who still is a bit up to date with what you're doing, but who doesn't do the daily supervision. And then you have a daily supervisor who you can go to as often as you like, who helps you to tackle your problems, also with your scientific project in the small steps. And then also to have an external supervisor who's independent of the other two. So because these are usually from the same institution, if the formal one you have a problem with the formal one, it's mostly the daily one can't help you because he's in the same hierarchical system. So it's good to also have an external one that checks and that also discusses with you to see if everything is fine, so you can catch problems early on. That can also help you to speak up, because sometimes it's just communication problems. So that's the one part. And the second part is also not just about the supervision, but about the dependencies that you have. Because I think it's different in the UK, for example, where not grading and funding and everything is in one person. But at least in Germany, it's mostly one professor making this decision for you and also basically shaping your career. And it would be good to be able to distribute that away from each other. So that you have a supervisor that's not giving you your final grade at the end.
Yeah, I see. No. Indeed, Elisa, we have something similar for our students. We recommend them to have a fellow mentor, for example, which is not necessarily someone in the same field of research. Actually, is not very typical, but this person of trust that you can ask about advices for career, for anything. And then there is for example, the Office for Science is me that has a rule of helping the supervisory team and the student to develop. So it's again another independent. So in this sense, you see diversifying the support. Okay, yeah, it's really, really fascinating. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Giacomo. So I see a question from Jacob in the chat. If Jacob wants to ask it himself.
Yeah. Thank you, Leah. It's really amazing to see all of this. I was wondering, since if I saw the reference correctly, this was 2 or 3 years ago, right? How have more senior people reacted to these recommendations? Are there already any changes, or has there been any pushback against these recommendations so far?
So it's working quite well, especially mental health has been quite a good, like the pandemic has helped a lot for people to accept that this is a problem, which is nice. And to be honest, the surveys inside the network, so also by the headquarters of the Max Planck Society, are taking very seriously, because it's scientists. So if you show them data, they actually care. So it's nice. So it's really been worked on. The working conditions, so the hard facts are always a bit harder to tackle for, but also there, like we see slight improvements. But as I said, this PAX, for example, it's now being worked on to be implemented broadly. Redefining supervisory role will take a bit of time, because we know academia is slow, especially with a lot of the older generations being in important places. But from what we get is that people do want to change and want to improve it. And also for especially power abuse has been tackled a lot with different reporting lines and different prevention mechanisms and so on. So we see that it's actually got a lot of positive feedback. But of course, change is always slow. Yeah.
Thank you, Leah. Yeah, it's good to hear that. So I think we can take a very last question from Eva. And then I see also other reaction on the chat, but those we can, on this part, on the supervision, that we can take maybe for the discussion later. So Eva.
Right, so really amazing presentation and really amazing study as well, with such a big number of participants. I find it really, really great. And I actually have 2 quick questions. The first one is your data open access actually? Can we see it, and is it published somewhere? And the second thing is actually you do have a great network of actually PhD candidates, and you mentioned access to mental health and mental health professionals. So I was just wondering if you have something specifically. So many universities have those onboard psychologists for students in general, but as we see here, some of the challenges are very specific. So in your structure, do you have like a PhD psychologist, or is there something specific for the PhD students?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for the question. So unfortunately, no, our data is not open access. We are hoping that this will change in the future. It's a bit hard since, like, of course, research institutions are always a bit reluctant to share if they don't know what you can find in the data. Like maybe it will reveal that, I don't know, this one is really doing something weird, which we don't see at the moment. It's academic problems. what we have is we try to publish it in an anonymous way. The problem is if it's open access, we promise our respondents to really make sure that it's and to preserve their anonymity. That's why they're really honest in answering. And at the moment, this trust is more worth to us than making it open access, because then we really need to make sure, but it would be one of the goals for the future to maybe make sure. And also we want to do these studies every 2 years from now onwards to also track change. So then it would be nice if actually people that don't do it on a voluntary basis could analyze the data and learn more. And for the mental health services, it's nothing specific for PhDs, but in the Max Planck Society, there's something specific for all Max Planck employees. So it's the EMAP system. It's from the Fürstenberg Institute. So it's an institute that it's offering consultations services. So it's hotlines. I think they have an emergency line, but also you can make dates and different languages where you can call and ask for help, and then they advise you on where you can on different things. I haven't used it, but I got some good feedback for it, except for that sometimes it's hard to make a date. So this is what they organize for everyone to have something to go to in a language they feel comfortable with, because I think it at least covers 5 or 6 languages, which is better than German health system, with mostly being in German, I guess.
Thank you very much, Leah, and thank you. I would like to thank all the speakers that have talked so far. Thanks a lot for the discussion that started and that will go on after the break. So we stop here and we meet again at 4 p.m. in more or less 15 minutes. And after the break, we will have another invited talk on the impostor syndrome by Sanne Fenstra, and then we'll have a discussion until 5:30. So see you later. Have a good